Hi. I haven't been on YouTube for a hot second. But I was thinking at the beginning of the summer, before I went to Spain, that I would, at the end of the summer, talk about the movies I watched, the drawings that I did throughout the summer, and the books that I read. So this particular video, I decided to talk about the movies I have watched. So, the first three movies I'm going to talk about were movies I watched either going to or coming from Spain. And I don't remember specifics about them because I was on like 12, 24-hour, what was it? It was a long flight. And I was kind of like half sleeping through most of it. But there were some like significant moments in those movies. So the first movie I remember watching was The Great Gatsby, which I had always wanted to watch it, but I didn't know how it would affect me mentally or emotionally. And I didn't really go into it knowing anything about it. But obviously, I have always been dazzled by that time period's fashion and style. So I was just like, oh, it's so beautiful the entire time. Um, but I remember getting to the end of it and I could, everyone else on the plane was asleep and it was completely dark in the plane. And I was getting towards the end of it and watching that green light flash at the end, and I was just bawling. Yeah, so it's a powerful movie. Just showing kind of how all these different things you can pursue in your life and not be fulfilled and not be enough. And it's heartbreaking. And I'll come back to that one. The next one I watched was The Wedding Singer, which I had watched Adam Sandler and that actress before in other things, but that was my first time watching him do something when he was that young. I think that was when he was younger, or one of his first movies or something. And I don't remember much from that because, like I said, I was really tired. But the line I do remember is that song where he sings, "Somebody kill me, please." And just that whole, like, hey, I wrote this song about my ex. Oh, I just, that was a moment for me. The movie after that I watched, I kind of got on a comedy kick for a minute. Um, the other one I watched was Why Him, which is more of a modern movie. I got out of these kind of older style move. Well, Great Gatsby isn't that old, but Why Him, I thought was interesting because it showed a man that genuinely wanted to get married and yet and wanted to mature to the point and be respected to the point that her parents would respect her or respect him as a person, and also pursuing her. And even though he was like really immature and still very, childish, he still had mature emotions. And I thought that was really an interesting take on modern love and people. Let's be honest, millennials, um, trying to navigate um, long-term relationships, because it's almost not it's not easy to get approval of the previous generation and also keeping your relationship together just in general. So I found that a really interesting. I will be honest, I'm pretty sure the version that I watched was like a clean version where they either skipped the swear words or made them into other words, because like I was reading their lips and you know what they're saying, but so that was kind of interesting. I hadn't experienced that in a while, so I was like, huh, that's so if you watch the actual movie, there's probably a lot more swearing in it and a lot of awkward, weird humor, which some of it was honestly kind of funny. So, the first movie I remember watching when I came home was Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Now, I'm late to the party on this one, I know. I'm late to a party on a lot of things because I don't watch many movies while I'm in school. I just get really busy and it doesn't happen. But this particular one I thought was a unique concept for a superhero movie of having alternate dimensions, having the past comic book characters incorporated into the thing. And I know from my comic book savvy people that they're like actually the comic book characters that existed. And I was like, oh, that is so cool that they did something like that. And finding a different way to incorporate that into one universe. I think there's a lot of directions I think they could go with that if they wanted to. I thought it was a good story about family, finding your strength, and using that strength for the good of everyone around you, and obviously working together with your strengths. There was something else. Oh, and I thought about like the character of his aunt and the character of, I think it's, who's Batman's caretaker. Oh my gosh, I can't remember. But between those characters, if I was in a superhero movie, that's what I would like to be, of just like a character that takes care of the superhero when they come home. They're like, did you eat? Do I need to wash your clothes? Did you get enough sleep last night? That kind of character I think would be really fun for me. Okay, so the other thing is that I really like anime. And I watch it a lot. I've been trying to get into some of the darker animes. One that I started, I forgot about this. I don't have this on the list that I have in front of me. One that I started was When Seagulls Cry, which has like a Japanese name. I watched the first couple episodes of that, and that was really dark and scary. But it kind of goes into like this idea that you should not make rash decisions. Well, it's basically the whole idea of money is the root of all evil, the love of money is the root of all evil, and that if you invest your entire life on that, it can all be taken away. So that was like the basics that I got out of that. I didn't watch the whole show yet. The other one I watched was this other horror one that I forgot the name of. It's about it's a group of ghost hunt, I think it's called. And that one's intense and scary sometimes. It's not just scary. I don't know how to describe this, because I have several things like this that I watched this year where it's more psychological, of like emotional things happening. amidst these things that are supposed to be scary, but I connect with a lot of the emotional aspects of it rather than like the scary aspects of it. And that's kind of how I process through horror a lot of time and like scary things, is that I think about it psychologically. And I enjoy it in that respect. So, Ghost Hunt, and then the most recent one that I hopefully will finish before the summer's over, I have 3 episodes left, is Gunketsuo, or also known as The Count of Monte Cristo. That anime, I remember watching the first episode of that, and it's one, and I said then, and I still believe this now, it's one of the most beautiful animes I have ever watched. It is a little older, but the style is so unique and so colorful that even when the story got a little draggy for my taste, I have trouble watching series. I'll talk about this when we get to Stranger Things. If the story gets a little draggy, I have a hard time like paying attention to what's going on because I'm like, ugh, just get to the conclusion or the resolution or the climax. Just get where you're going. So, but the thing with Gunketsuo was that it was so colorful and so visually pleasing the whole way through. It could always draw me back into whatever was happening. So, I believe that particular one was it reminded me a lot of my own personal struggles with trust and putting all your trust in a person and it not working out very well. And there were a lot of emotional dynamics of couples and relationships and things where specifically people asking, do I actually love this person or am I just staying in this relationship because it's comfortable? And I was like, whew, that was interesting. And I think a very healthy thing to think about, again, with relationships in the modern era. Yeah, I could do a whole dramatic monologue on that. But, you know. The other show that I was watching that I'm not sure I recommend this one to people, and I did not finish it, and I'm not sure that I will, because it's a really dark story, and the way they were setting it up and portraying it. I got a couple episodes in, and it's, I think, one of the darkest things I have ever watched. And it's called The Act. It's one of, to me, again, like I said, it's the psychological stuff that's really interesting to me, the psychological horror. So, and it's not so much horror as like a thriller-ish, and it's kind of horrific. Horrific. That should be a genre. Horrific. But the way they portray it just made me anxious to the point where I just didn't feel good. So, I don't talk about that one very much, but I did watch like a Dateline special on that particular case that show talks about. And I think that the way they did that, like Dateline did that or whatever it was more, felt better to me because it was more informative than watching it happen. I think that's what was bothering me. You know, I don't know. It was just me. On that particular day when I was watching it, I just didn't feel good. Let's see. The other like series I watched all the way through by myself was Accidentally on Purpose. And this particular show was one of the few shows, it was kind of a break from all this like intense stuff that I was watching. It was genuinely funny. And I struggle to find like comedy TV shows sometimes very funny. It's not that I have like a very refined taste in comedy, but I have like my social laugh where I just go, eh, eh. And then I just have the belly laugh, which just comes from my stomach and goes throughout my whole body, and I cry. That's this show. And I think to me, it almost felt like the older Disney shows that we used to watch, like That's So Raven, Hannah Montana, that kind of thing. But I don't want the comparison is that it's more of a slice of life thing, and it's like a day by day with these people. The comparison kind of stops there because it's very adult humor. If like anything in adult humor makes you uncomfortable, don't watch it. I just don't. But I will admit that there was less like how do I put this, like visual bad things. It was more verbal bad things, if you catch my drift. So that way, it depends on what you're comfortable with, but I thought it was funny. And I really like some of the themes that it talked about, because I, as a young adult, I have to give this a lot of thought. So the specific plotline is about this woman recently broke up with her long-time boyfriend and meets this guy and ends up getting pregnant with this guy that she just wanted to spend time with once. And yeah. I'm dancing around it because I don't like saying those things sometimes because it feels demeaning to me, to other people, and I don't like being demeaning to other people and the choices they make. So she gets pregnant and she tells him, and his response is, I want to help you. I want to stand by you. I want to have a part in the child's life. And I thought that was a really special moment where he was just like, I don't want to be my dad that just walked out on me and have my kid wondering where I was his entire life. And I was like, huh, cool. People actually caring and taking responsibility for their actions. Yeah, it's pretty great. So I liked that aspect of it, but also it, in a roundabout way, kind of talked about how having extremely intimate relationships before marriage can kind of make your social dynamics and your mental, emotional health kind of messes it all up, because you don't know, like the entire show is just her figuring out that this guy that lives in her house is actually going to care and be around for the rest of her life and her child's life. And so it's like, he's actually a decent human being. But maybe we made a poor decision. So having that idea that it's kind of you have to take responsibility for your actions. and that's what I really liked about it. So the next movie I watched was my sister's pick, and just for clarification, my sister is older than me. She just likes watching animated movies with me because she's wonderful like that. And we, along with my brother-in-law and my parents, watched Wonder Park. Now, if you liked the emotional, wrenching things that happened in Big Hero 6 and that whole thing in Inside Out about Bing Bong, you would like this movie. Because it's just a lot of things of processing, again, emotional intelligence, processing through emotions. And it's so beautifully done. And I really appreciated how it was kind of constructed in a way that was different than those movies I mentioned. It's different than Big Hero 6. It's different. It's a different concept. But the similar ideologies to promote towards kids that I definitely think is timely, that they need maturity and emotional intelligence to deal with all these things that they're going through. So that movie was special. All right. Now it's time to talk about Stranger Things. So I've recently gotten about halfway through season 2, so I'm just going to talk about what I saw in season 1 because that's what I have written here. Okay, so season 1, the thing I liked the most about it was that it wasn't, there was some of this going on, but it wasn't all just the kids. And it wasn't the kids dancing around their parents. There is some of that, granted, but they weren't by themselves. They have the policeman, I don't remember names, I'm sorry. The policeman guy and Will's mom and the 2 teenagers, and then you have the kids. And so it's not just the kids, it's all these people are involved, and they told an adult. They told an adult, and they communicated with this adult, and they're getting their help. And that just did my heart good when that part of the story started developing, that the adults started getting involved with the kids. I was like, amazing. We don't have to do all this stuff by ourselves. We don't have to suffer alone. We don't have to fight Demogorgon so long. Honestly, yeah. And the way I cope with like scary things and jump scares and stuff, I will sing my little song called Jump Scare Land. Jump Scare Land. Again, we're in Jump Scare Land. And all I can say from season 2 is that I just wanted them to kill the pet at the beginning. But they didn't. And I was like, I told you. I got a little salty about that. And like I said about Gunkatsuo, and yeah, was that at times Stranger Things gets a little draggy. And it's just hard sometimes because when they go to the heart of the warehouse or whatever, I wanted to call it Area 51. I've been seeing that in the media way too much. When they go to the facility and show them the heart and say, don't talk, I feel like a lot of that could have been cut out, and this could have been like an hour and 30-minute movie. Because it just gets old, and then all the pointless bickering and the teenagery stuff, and ugh. now that I'm not a teenager anymore, I can say now that sometimes I get really upset at teenagers. Which just makes, I remember what it's like now. I'm like, no. And I can say that because I don't like the way I was, but I like who I'm becoming, and I think that's what's important. Anyway, so the last most recent thing I've been watching and kind of semi thinking about is this show called Lore. Again, Amazon Prime, like a lot of the other stuff I watch, because that's literally the only account that I have. All this other stuff I watch with my brother-in-law and my sister. But Lore is special. It's a show that talks about like the historical basis of things that are spooky. Just generally spooky. One of the episodes that kind of drew me in and made an impression on me was this one about what the Irish people called changelings, which Irish people had this superstition that if a person was in a fairy ring, and fairies are not Tinkerbell, very bad people, nymphs, very bad. These fairies would take the soul of a person and then replace, and another fairy would come in its place and pretend to be that person. So, excuse me. So this man believes his wife is a changeling. All this bad stuff happens. But the thing that made an impression on me was that a priest came to their house and said, "We have the grace of God. You do not have to have your superstition." And the guy's response was, "I want my superstition and your God. And I just feel like that I need to cover all my bases. So I'm going to pray to God. I'm going to use this gross poison." It wasn't poison. It was, I think, human something. It was pretty gross. Whatever it was. I don't remember specifically, but it was gross. He was like, "I'm going to cover all my bases so then she will be herself again." And the thing is that she didn't change. It was kind of this, they described it as kind of a mental, not a disorder, but kind of like a mental trick that sometimes your brain, I forget the specific name of it. But your brain just says, no, this person is not themselves. They are an imposter, to the extent that this person is not that person. Almost like seeing, like that idea of seeing a doppelganger. It's that kind of idea. So, yeah, it was, and so that whole religious thing of I want my superstition plus God and cover all those bases is scary to me, because I feel like that's sometimes what we do, is that we have our superstitions and then we have our faith, and those don't always coincide, because we want to be able to explain all of the unknown because it's unknown. But I think part of living is you have to be okay with something being unknown and trusting God with everything else. So, yeah, it was a really interesting show. There's also ones I've watched about lobotomies, how that was cures for mental health. There were ones about different medical things that did not go well. Things that it was medical, the transition from medicine or superstition to medicine. And there were a lot of insane practices that were pretty scary. I will admit some of the episodes did deal with some creepy things that I kind of shy away from personally, just like spirit realm things, specifically like talking to spirits and that sort of stuff, which a lot of it was debunking it, but they tried to leave it kind of open to be kind of spooky and scary. That kind of made me uncomfortable, so if you're uncomfortable with that sort of thing, I don't suggest watching it, and don't watch it at night, because every little noise will keep you awake, but I'm a nervous person, so that kind of happens anyway. I find it intriguing. I recently found out Lore has its own podcast with Aaron Mahnke, the person who created the show, as the reader, and he has a very nice voice. I enjoy listening to his voice. I was just listening to a podcast I listened to 2 podcasts. I can talk about the podcast. This particular one was about how medicinal cannibalism, and it was happening in the 1800s. Yeah, because they were talking about the Civil War, about pre-Civil War. There were people who believed in medicinal cannibalism, people who were being killed for violent crimes. Extremely specific. But it was just so bizarre, and just weird superstitions about people's bodies, and it was interesting though. I have a wide variety of interests, and sometimes I need to take a break from that, and I read the books that I have, and I do drawings and all sorts of stuff. So I'm not just watching all this like scary, weird stuff. Also listening to music, so I'm not just doing this, but it has been very interesting summer of movies and shows. And I think reviewing it like this and talking about it, I think is healthy, just to do on your own or do with friends. So you're processing through what you're watching. So I hope you enjoyed that. It's kind of fun. So I'll hopefully have time to figure out a way and find time to talk about the drawings I've done and the books I've tried to read. I have some confessions about book reading, but I'll save that for another video. Yeah. But good summer so far. Hope you have had a good summer as well. Bye.